Brad, if you could take over.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very lovely to be participating with all of you today. And Sham, thank you for your brief introduction. I am Brad Heath. I'm the Chief Data Officer of Datonomy Solutions, and I'm one of the founders of Datonomy. And just so you know, the name Datonomy comes from combining the word data with the word autonomy, which means freedom with the right to govern. And I came out of a history of really seeing that data wasn't free and it was tremendously stuck and controlled by systems, and then by lots of different systems across the organizations, and it just wasn't as accessible and usable as it should be. So that really drove our passion, and it says it in the name that we believe that data needs to be able to be more freely available to enable the businesses to drive value. My passion for data started 25 years ago. I was working in my father's business, which now I look back on it quite interestingly, it was actually a digital transformation. He had a paper-based industrial catalog, and it contained product information on about 700 companies. And we then transformed that into a digital catalog that had product information covering more than 50,000 companies. And the key learning that came out of that was, why is it that companies are so bad at sending us and sharing information about their businesses that would be fundamentally good for them to share? And they just were not capable of doing it. And there started my data journey, and here we are. So the subject of data and how that translates into opportunities. And, when I was preparing for this, I realized that we've come a long way in the 20 years. And I have to begin by saying thank you to all of you in the audience who've given up your time today to come and participate in a talk about data. Because as a data evangelist for over 20 years, going and visiting countless companies and explaining the benefits of improving the way that they manage their data, it's often been a slightly lonely journey. And I've got friends who are convinced I'm a liar because they say nobody can be passionate about data. But when you understand that data is basically everything, your customers, your products, your transactions, all the records, it's data. So I understand and I recognize that almost every person in the audience who's come in from the banking side, you didn't join the bank because you're passionate about data. You joined the bank because you have skills and you got into the banking industry. But here we are having to deal with data in today's complicated and sophisticated landscape. So the question as to why we have to have this discussion about data is that really it is everything, and leveraging your data makes business sense. Your ability to have excellence in business processes, your ability to extract value out of your data and provide better service offerings to your customers, it all comes out of the data. So just looking back a little bit, we've come a long way, but we have been creating data for a very, very long time. So through the journey of the first mainframe computers, where space was very, very constrained and expensive, to much more flexible desktop and server computing to provide systems to the business, and now with our modern cloud technology platforms. And what we've done throughout from the beginning is we've captured information about our businesses into these systems. So it's information about our customers, about our products, about our suppliers. All of these data types can be grouped together under the heading of master data. It's the data that enables your business to function. And when it's in a system, those systems are used to drive business processes and to process business transactions. And we end up doing that in a lot of systems. And the example that I want to cover today, just very quickly, a customer of ours is Sanlam, a very, very large insurer in South Africa and an international business, installed their first mainframe system in 1958, their first PC server-based systems in the very early 80s. And this number always floors me, that they now have over 3,000 systems that that comprise their enterprise IT estate. And that translates into tremendous complexity. And I'm sure some of you in the audience are aware of the complexity that happens in your IT estates. And really, this was done because there was no data vision and no data strategy at the time that they started those journeys, because I don't think anybody in the organization assumed that they would end up with over 3,000 systems. And so now we sit with the reality that we have today, and how to drive value to the business working with that. So it's not all bad news, and the objective for us today is to really just share some of the journeys and stories of the people that we brought into this presentation to show you practical ways of getting onto this journey. So if we look at Sanlam, the very first thing that we did for Sanlam when we started to develop their data strategy was to understand their business strategy. And within that business strategy, we identified 9 key drivers that are absolutely dependent on data. So for the business to achieve its business strategy, it is going to have to receive and use very key data, and the better the quality of that data, the better the outcomes are going to be. So we can actually prioritize our data activities based on the business activity strategy of the business. What we will produce as an outcome is a modern data platform that brings together many different data sources, improves the quality of that data, and is able to provision that data to the business in a very efficient and effective way. And in order to do that, we actually have to create a competency, we have to create a capability, we have to create a function in the business that is fundamentally responsible for data. And that function has really been missing. And it's a little bit like if you called your business and said, who's responsible for finance and reporting, and you didn't have a chief financial officer, and you didn't have a finance department and all the different people and roles that are involved in that. To a large extent, that's been the case with data. Responsibility for it sits somewhere between IT and the business, and generally a reluctance for somebody to take ownership and accountability for it, and therefore there's an impact on its quality and availability. So in order to do that, we build up this data management center of excellence, and there are a number of different functions and competencies within that. And with that in place, we can then prioritize which data to bring through this process and then into the platform and to be made available to the business. And when I go back and, as I said to you, it's 3,000 systems in the landscape. You don't try to bring 3,000 systems at once. You can prioritize based on your business strategy and bring those on board one at a time. So that's a very simplistic look, but I think a clear look at what it means to actually create a data strategy for your business that is a key driver to enabling your business strategy. And this slide is not meant to scare you. It's actually meant to encourage you. It's a report from the Harvard Business Review, and the first statement there: the ability to manage torrents of data has become crucial to company success, but most organizations remain badly behind the curve. And it's possible that a number of you in the audience might be thinking about the issue of data and the complexities of data and where you currently stand as a business with data. And I really just want to reassure you that almost all organizations are in a similar position. There are very, very few organizations that are have really made great strides in it. So it's not a case of we doomed and gloomed. It's a case of being able to get on with it and being able to do it practically. And so that last comment there, that companies that have not yet built a data strategy and a strong data management function need to catch up very, very quickly, or plan your exit. And that's really the key of what I wanted to cover for you today. But in the words of one famous person, there's one more thing. And I want to reassure you that while others are still out there wrestling legacy systems to extract value for business because they had no data, vision, and strategy, African banks have the opportunity to leapfrog others by beginning with a strong vision and strategy, and utilizing the technologies and approaches that we've used and that exist, and that really are now powerful tools to address this data issue and to drive value in your business. So that's my presentation. I'm going to hand over to Sharman Jr.
Thank you so much for making that point. I think, for business, answering the why, the question sometimes seems flummoxing, like, is this the latest trend? Because business typically exists to increase revenue, reduce cost, and win customers from the competition. And for that, they mostly develop business strategies. But I think the key point that you landed here was, in order to achieve your business strategy and to see if you're on track, or to even see where you should go, having a data strategy that collects quality data to help you in that process is a key reason for why data. So thanks, Brad. And I think you also demonstrated a very good example, a practical example of how a very large organization is making the transition. But that transition is a lot more difficult than it needs to be because of the lack of an original strategy in the beginning. And I think that presents so much hope for the future for anyone starting out or at early stages of their data transformation.